When Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote A History of the Kings of Britain in 1138, he could have hardly guessed that his creation would become as famous as it is today. In his history, Geoffrey introduced King Arthur and began his tale, which has been picked up by many different authors over the years and expanded upon. These other authors have added important pieces to Arthurian lore, like the Round Table, the love affair between Guinevere and Lancelot, and even the famous quest for the Holy Grail. Even beyond that, Geoffrey of Monmouth would have never envisioned what the future would bring, with its boon of technology that would move Arthur from the pages of his book to the silver screen and beyond. Today we're going to learn all about Arthurian legend and talk about its various depictions in video games throughout history. So get ready, try and pull the sword out of the stone, and join us for another trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello, and welcome to the 140th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we will tell you a story about one topic relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game, a console, a person, and so on and so forth. While doing so, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we're all going to learn about King Arthur, his Knights of the Round Table, the quest for the Holy Grail, and then we'll look at depictions of Arthurian legend in video games throughout history. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host. He's the Lancelot on our round table. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, how goes the quest for the Holy Grail?
Well, I finished that quest a long time ago, Dave.
I knew it. I just knew you were going to say that. Oh my goodness. All right, before we get into it, what are we playing? What video games have we played this week?
Well, Dave, this week saw some Rocket League, some RuneScape, some Mech Warrior 5.
Nice.
I think that's about it. So, yeah, how about yourself?
Didn't we
Wait.
play Ark? We played Ark.
Oh, yeah, and Ark. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Because that's the only thing I've played video game wise in the last week was that day we spent on Ark. So,
Well,
Ark,
damn.
that's it. Yep.
Look at you go. But hey, it's a busy
yeah,
week.
It's been a busy 2 or 3 weeks. I haven't had a lot of time for video games lately, other than, this. So here we go.
Well, here we go.
Have you had to study King Arthur much in school?
I wouldn't say much. I'm sure there was a lesson or two, but not much that I didn't have a class or anything on it.
Would you say you've learned much about King Arthur? Probably everything you know about King Arthur you know from RuneScape.
I mean, Monty Python.
Oh, that's actually a really good point.
So, I mean, I've seen some things, but,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm a King Arthur history buff. Like, I'm sure you are over here, Mr. History Guy.
No, but also yes. King Arthur is very much part of the medieval literary tradition, and for the longest time, I wanted to be a medievalist, which is essentially someone who's a scholar of all things medieval. In fact, I think that if I had ever went back to school for graduate studies, that's probably where I would have leaned to, because I always enjoyed medieval literature more than a lot of others. It's just so cool. Like, when you study medieval literature, you kind of get to see that time, and you get to learn about, these medieval figures. You get to learn about the history of medieval times, which is, who doesn't like knights and chivalry and castles and trebuchets? I mean, come on, Rob, trebuchets.
A textbook trebuchet, Dave, not to be confused with a catapult.
And then, like, even more cool is, like, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today was written in old languages. You know, when you study medieval literature, you spend a lot of time studying them in their original languages, which brings you like it's a different understanding. So, you know, a lot of King Arthur's literature was written in Middle English, and Old French, frankly, is where the basis of it comes. You know, the story of the Holy Grail itself, and we'll get into this, is actually like it derives from an old French poem. Uh, and that's just it's just cool to see that, because when you study that, like you study the languages too. You know, I actually had to take an English course where we studied old, middle, and modern English and how the language changed. So you get to learn about how vowels shift and consonants shift, and why we still have like the K on night when it was connect, you know, back then, and crap like that. And it's just, I always really liked medieval literature, and we can talk about it today. Yay!
Yay, let's do it,
You
Dave.
have you ever played any other than RuneScape, any King Arthur video games?
I cannot say that I have, no.
Yeah, you've probably tripped on a few of the things we'll look at today. So,
I mean, I'm sure I've seen them or heard them, but I really don't know of playing anything other than the RuneScape.
true statement. So King Arthur is what we know to be, or what we kind of call, one of the legendary kings of Britain. He is the central figure, I'd say the central figure. There are others, but I'd call him the most important one personally in medieval literary tradition. So medieval literary tradition has what we call three story cycles, Western story cycles rather, that most medieval literature from this time is based on. So you have the matter of Rome, which includes everything from classical mythology. You have the matter of France. Charlemagne is the central figure of all of the matter of France. And then King Arthur here is central to what we call the matter of Britain. And before we get into the matter of Britain and the literature of which King Arthur is central to, let's talk about his historical accuracy. So, first of all, right off the bat, I will tell you that there is no actual King Arthur.
Blasphemy.
He did not exist. There are pieces of historical literature that allude to a figure that could be King Arthur, but there's nothing definitive enough for us to actually say, yes, he existed. It is all theory. You know, there are kings in the right area, in the right place, in the right time, but there is literally nothing that says King Arthur was real, I was here. And for that reason, it's generally believed that he is completely and utterly a fictional character that is likely, you know, was likely inspired by one or more actual historical British figures, early kings, or what have you. He is, for all purposes, a character in a book. Well, books, plural. Most of what we believe King Arthur to be in the Arthurian legend is thanks to a cleric named Geoffrey of Monmouth, who lived between 1095 and 1155 Common Era CE. And he is best known for a book called The History of the Kings of Britain, which basically its claim to fame is it has the earliest cohesive, developed narrative of King Arthur. It is, for all purposes, the book that has written King Arthur into what we know Arthurian legend to be today. Now, the Historia Britanniae is divided between 12 books, and the story of King Arthur is pretty much told from book number 7 through book number 12. Book number 7 is what we call the Prophecies of Merlin, and that is, as it sounds, it's a bunch of prophecies from the great magician Merlin, and it is very much alludes to what we believe are actual historical events of the time, mixed in with a lot of all this high fantasy stuff that we know of Arthur today. Book 8 is very much the story of Arthur's father, Uther Pendragon, and Arthur's story himself is all the remaining books. So, like in Book 8, Britain's under war. Aurelius, Ambrosius, and his brother Uther are basically assisted by Merlin in taking over. Ambrose becomes ill. Uther leads the army. Basically, then an enemy assassin comes in, poses as a physician, and poisons Ambrosius. The king dies. There's a comet in the sky that takes the form of a dragon's head. That's a Pendragon. And so Merlin interprets this as a sign that the king is dead. So Uther is now victorious and succeeds him. And with that symbol, he adds the name Pendragon to his name, and Uther Pendragon becomes the king of Britain. So fun with poison and everything. Then Uther is under war again, basically. He gets help from the Duke of Cornwall, and while he's celebrating this victory with the Duke of Cornwall, he falls in love with the Duke's wife. That leads to a war between Uther and the Duke of Cornwall, and basically, Merlin helps Uther and the Duke's wife hook up, basically undercover.
Nice.
That's when Arthur's conceived. So
Very
the
nice.
Duke of Cornwall gets murdered, and then Uther marries his wife. And then war happens again. Uther triumphs over the Saxons. This is a Saxon war. And then basically he goes to drink water from a spring, only to find that the Saxons had poisoned the spring water, and Uther dies. And that brings us to Arthur, because when Uther dies, his son Arthur assumes the throne, and he obliterates the Saxons because they killed his father, and he doesn't want to have to worry about them. So he literally just absolutely obliterates the Saxons, makes sure that they can't come back, salts the earth, all the meanest, nastiest stuff you could think of. Arthur then conquers most of Northern Europe, and he ushers in a great period of peace and prosperity that basically lasts until the Romans come back and say, we want you to pay tribute to Rome again. Arthur then goes to fight Lucius in France, Gaul, intending to become emperor. But as he's gone, he gets betrayed by Mordred. Mordred seduces and marries Guinevere, seizes the throne. This is all the stuff in Arthurian legend. You know Arthurian legend, don't you?
Not quite this in depth, no.
No, no. Have you ever heard of Mordred? Mordred's in RuneScape, isn't he? Isn't he in that quest? No, Morgana is in the quest,
Yep,
isn't she?
Morgan. Well, it's Morgan Le Fay.
Morgan, thank you, Morgan Le Fay. Yeah. So basically, Arthur is angry, so he returns and he kills Mordred. He is basically mortally wounded in the battle, and then they carry his body off to the Isle of Avalon, and then the kingdom goes to Constantine, and that's pretty much the way the story goes. That's real Arthurian legend right there. Uther Pendragon, Merlin helping him hook up with uh, Agurna, um, and then Arthur becoming king, and then having the this is the basic stuff, right? Uther Pendragon fights, gets poisoned. Mordred seduces Guinevere and seizes the throne from Arthur. Arthur and Mordred have a freaking battle royale. They both basically get killed as part of the whatchamacallit, and Arthur ends up on the Isle of Avalon, is where his body basically is. Most of what we know, what we associate with Arthurian legend, I know not all of, probably little of that is found in a lot of stuff. So I guess, Rob, real quick, would you say that most of what you know about Arthurian legend is Monty Python?
I don't know that I would necessarily say that. I feel that a lot of what I know is just from different forms of media, Knights of the Round Table, the Excalibur, all the fun stuff.
Because I would say that, like, if I think back, my introduction to Arthurian legend would have been the Disney cartoon Sword in the Stone.
And that's definitely one that I have seen as well. And that's that's kind of probably where I started, because obviously growing up watching Disney all the time and still to this day. And then as I got older, I started seeing more and more about it in games or in movies like Monty Python, or I'm sure, like I said, I had to have learned some of it in school at some point. Um, but I'd say Sword in the Stone is where it started.
This history Britain history book from Geoffrey the cleric is pretty much where we get most of the basis of Arthurian legend, including Uther Pendragon, Merlin, Guinevere, Excalibur is found in this book too. The sword, like I said, the final battle against Mordred, and Arthur's final rest in Avalon, which is a fictional island, by the way. Um, but as you'll notice, Rob, we're missing a very big chunk of Arthurian legend, are we not?
I would say so, yeah.
And that would be what we got from Monty Python, I would argue. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, I don't know if that's what we got from it, but it's definitely a source of it, I'm
I mean, it's
sure.
literally Monty Python and the Holy
I
Grail.
mean, there was more than one.
but and I'm gonna go back to you because you're a huge RuneScape fan. We've covered RuneScape before. RuneScape has quite a bit of Arthurian legend in it, doesn't it?
I would say so, yeah.
And in RuneScape, like what part of Arthurian legend is in RuneScape?
The quest for the Holy Grail.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty accurate. I mean, you have to go meet the Fisher King, right?
Yep.
And you find the Holy Grail and you bring it back to Camelot. I mean, some of the knights of the round are in there. Which knight? I'm trying to remember. You meet knights of the round, don't you?
You definitely asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to.
Well, Percival, Lancelot.
I'm
The,
trying to remember all the ones that are in there.
I mean, I know
Um,
there's more, but I know at the very least, like when you're trying to go up against Morgan Le Fay, Merlin's in there for
ah,
sure.
Sir Mordred is actually the son
Yeah,
of, or the daughter. Yeah, yeah, the son of
that's the son. Yeah,
LaFay.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly which ones were in there. I was trying to find out, but I know that some of the Knights of the Round are in there.
Yeah, they're definitely in there. The quest for the Holy Grail definitely did not come from the history of the kings of Britain. Did not come from this book. Rather, we have a French poet. Man, what is it? Sheraton de Troyes. I'm gonna butcher that name. I'm sorry. I meant to look it up. I did not have time to. We have that French poet to thank for that little gem for the quest for the Holy Grail. De Troyes, maybe it's De Troyes. I don't know. He is responsible for many of what we know to be chivalric romances. The story of Lancelot, the story of Percival, they added to Arthurian legend on top of being a chivalric romance. His French poem, which, like I said, was written in Old French, it's called Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, and it tells all about the abduction of Queen Guinevere. And it's basically the book, or the poem rather, where we get the love affair between Lancelot and Guinevere. And then actually, the quest for the Holy Grail is his last basically story, and it was unfinished actually, and it's called Percival, the Story of the Grail, and that's basically the earliest account of what we now know to be the quest for the Holy Grail. With Arthurian legend and with the Holy Grail, these are the basis of it, but through the years, other writers have taken these and either retold the same story slightly different, or expanded upon it, or changed it, and basically like we didn't it's where we are now. The Percival was written around 1190, but really it wasn't until like the late 12th century that the Grail was ever portrayed as Jesus's vessel from the Last Supper. That was a later addition to the Arthurian legend, and that's kind of what we know it as today, right? The Grail is what they used to capture Christ's blood at his crucifixion, but that wasn't what it was in the beginning at all. Kind of interesting if you think about it.
That indeed that it is, Dave. And doing some research, It does seem that they have many, if not all, of the knights because there's Kay, Bedivere, Peleus, Tristram, Palamedes, Lucan, Gawain, Lancelot, Percival, Galahad, and Mordred. So they cover their bases.
They covered the bases. When they designed Camelot and they put in the game, they made sure it was Camelot, Camelot, huh?
Oh yes, yes, they definitely did.
And the story of Percival has some of the other knights that we know. It also has Arthur's nephew, Sir Gawain. And Sir Gawain, of course, is made famous by the Middle English poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I believe, actually, I don't believe, I know they made it into a really visually stunning movie in the middle of, as we came out of lockdown. I think it was 2020 or 2021 they released it. You ever had to study Sir Gawain and the Green Knight?
Well, I thought it was pronounced Gawain, so obviously not.
Maybe I'm wrong. Uh,
No, but to be fair, I've never. That is not one that I was familiar with.
do you know how many seats there actually are at the round table?
Isn't it 9?
No.
No. Well, I mean 10 rather, but that's not the case.
Well, and I'm only telling you this because it's one of the really interesting things about this concept. So, of course, the Knights of the Round Table are basically it's a legendary fellowship of King Arthur that started, with all this. All members of the round table are equal to one another. You could be a sovereign royal, you could be a minor noble, and you're all the same stance in there. And so they're knights from all over. Of course, you're thinking there's nine because you know the famous ones, but it was a fellowship, and depending on the literature that you read about the Knights of the Round Table, you may only find that there's a dozen in one piece of literature. There's another one that claims that there were 1,600 seats at the round table.
Wow.
Yeah. 12, 13, 14, that was pretty common. 50 comes up a bunch of times, 60. But no joke. I mean, there's a piece of literature that says that that says they're 1,600. But I think most commonly you'll see between 100 and 300 at the table, most of which were empty though. So huge,
I
huge,
that
huge.
that's still a big ass round table, man.
It's a big ass round table. It's a big ass round table. And I mean, you never know most of them. There are like Aglavale, Bedivere. I mean, who's heard of Cador? Elian the White, Gatherez. We know Galahad, bastard son of Lancelot. Oh, he comes up in the Holy Grail. Hector de Maris, that's a good one. K, I think K's in there somewhere. Lionel, man, Lionel is such a fascinating Knights of the Round Table name. And then there's Yvain and Yvain the Bastard.
Nice.
Oh, those are the good ones. And then you have the whole list of like ones that don't mean anything, like Sir Askamore and Sir Marinduke and Sir Melian of the Mountain. Sir Reynold. That sounds interesting, doesn't it? Sir Reynold.
First name Ryan.
Sir Fergus.
Hmm.
Sir Lambagus. Hermanide. God, man, these are all interesting. Anyway, Knights of the Round Table, lots of stuff. And so, yeah, so that's probably a lot more about Arthurian legend that you ever wanted to know. That you ever wanted to know. But let's talk about the video game aspect of it, because that's why we're all here today.
Yeah, Dave. So tell us about them. Their video games.
So the inspiration for today's topic would be the very first game that Enix, now half of Square Enix, so the very first game that they ever published that was actually developed by an American company. Now this game was based on an animated series that lasted 2 seasons in syndication on TV, and also finds itself pretty much at the top of multiple lists of the most ridiculous adaptions of Arthurian legend. Now, the game came out for the Super Nintendo in May of 1995, and it's called King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. Are you ready for the premise?
Let's hear it, Dave.
Are you ready for the most ridiculous adaptation of Arthurian legend?
I don't know. You might be selling it too much.
Oh, it's ridiculous. So, Morgana, evil Morgana, imprisons King Arthur. So Merlin uses a crystal ball, and he locates a brave team of warriors in the future, led by Arthur King, that call themselves the Knights. And he summons them back into time, only to find that they're an American football team.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Sounds good so far.
So Merlin interprets their name as a sign of fate, and he asks the lady of the table to transform them into the Knights of Justice. And that's the premise for our King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. So, the video game is basically a Legend of Zelda inspired game, aka knockoff, where these knights have to go and collect the 12 keys of truth around the land. They have to retrieve Excalibur as part of the collecting the keys, find Morgana, defeat Morgana, and save King Arthur. Now, one little interesting side note about this game, the American company that made it was called Manley and Associates. They were a small independent video game developer founded by Ivan Manley, which really just was him and one other person working out of his house. But they grew. They started out working on what's called the design and implementation of games. They worked on Home Alone for DOS. They worked on Are We There Yet for DOS. They helped make The Wizard of Oz for SNES, and of course, here we are talking about one of their other games, King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. But as they kept working on these games, the team grew, at one point becoming a crew of 60 people. And somewhere at that point, they were bought out by EA, upon which time they were renamed to EA Seattle, which is actually the team that developed the first 6 titles in the Need for Speed series. So there you go. We actually talked about EA Seattle when we did our Motor City Online episode, because that's one of those 6 titles. They developed Motor City Online, which we've talked about in a previous episode. We somehow got from a really interesting SNES game to Need for Speed. Yay!
Yay! A lot of those movies that you mentioned too, the movie games, I actually didn't know those were games.
There you go.
Yeah, I hadn't heard a single one of them.
Anyway, this is not a great example of what they can do. This was a very bad game. Got really poor reviews. Most of them were like 2 or 3 out of 10. And to top it off, it was released during the same time as Chrono Trigger.
So it's destined to fail.
It was destined to fail. Yes, yes, absolutely destined to fail. There was little to no shot that King Arthur and the Knights of Justice were going to be successful.
I mean, the fact that they turned them into knights, if he had just kept them football players and that's what you had to play as, I'm sure it would have done much better.
Maybe, maybe. I mean, it only lasted 2 seasons as a cartoon, so I don't know.
Just saying they could have had a lot more seasons as a football team doing it.
Probably.
And then had the Detroit Lions guests.
Yeah. Oh my god. You know what? The Lions were not good, but the Lions were also different then, because that's when Barry Sanders was playing. I think roughly he would have still been playing then. So yeah, so Lions probably would have been halfway decent back then. Not that they were winning. We know that they're, as Lions lifetime Lions fans, that they never win. Anyway, moving on. There was, however, another SNES game that depicted Arthurian legend that fared much, much better. It too was inspired by the Legend of Zelda, and in fact, Enforce magazine gave it a review score of 92%, and in their review, they literally called it the next Zelda. Of course, it never
Damn.
became that because we don't know this game or series or anything. The game was released in March of 1994. It was developed by none other than Westwood Studios, who eventually made Command and Conquer. and we've covered their history in a previous episode. And that game is called Young Merlin. And basically, it followed Merlin as he enlisted the help of the Lady of the Lake to defeat the evil Shadow King. I remember ads for Young Merlin. It was kind of everywhere back here in the mid '90s, and obviously for reason. It was. I mean, it was a good game. It rated very well.
But you never played it.
You know what? I don't remember ever playing it. No, I was thinking about that. Did I ever rent it from the video store or anything like that? I don't ever remember playing Young Merlin at all. I remember ads for it. I remember reading like magazine articles about like how to beat this part or reviews or stuff like that. Like I can see in my head the game like picture wise on a magazine, but I don't think I've ever played it. No, or know anyone who played it. So, which is probably for whatever reason why we don't know it, and it never became the next Zelda. So
I'm just shocked that it got such great reviews, and it's not.
I don't know. You just
Yeah,
never know.
fair enough.
I didn't think much about that. I wonder where it released alongside like actual Link to the Past, probably in the same ballpark. Now, before we stray too far away from the topic of animated TV series in this category, I want to take a moment and talk about Blazing Dragons. Now, Blazing Dragons was an animated series that ran for 2 seasons. It was 1996, 97, 90 through 98 rather. It played on Toon Disney here in the United States, and basically it's a series about dragons, anthropomorphic dragons, so dragons who are made to be like people, and they're attacked by evil humans. So in it, King Allfire and his Knights of the Square Table fight against the evil Count Geoffrey. So this was more of a parody on King Arthur than an accurate retelling of Arthurian legend. But the point is that it too had a video game. This was a point and click adventure game. It was released for Sony PlayStation, the first PlayStation, and Sega Saturn in November of 1996. It rates very well. Its writing and humor are very heavily influenced by Monty Python, throwing it back to your Monty Python reference, Rob. In fact, one of the members of Monty Python, Terry Jones, is a voice actor in the game, but he is hardly the only one. So Cheech Marin is also a voice in the game.
Wow.
Henry Shearer, who voices a ton of Simpsons characters, Mr. Burns,
Yep.
Smithers, Skinner, Ned Flanders, he's a voice in the game. Jim Cummings, the voice of Winnie the Pooh, is in the game. The voice actors who are Dexter's parents in Dexter's Laboratory, both of those voice actors are in this game. People who voice the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are in the game. People who voice various Transformers are in the game. It is like literally a who's who of voice actors for the time. I mean, it's weird. I don't know anything about it. Probably because it was a point and click adventure released on the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. That just seems like it was doomed, because point and click games did not do good on consoles. Um,
No, they don't translate as well. But that is quite the damn list. I mean, I yeah, that's incredible.
yeah, I was. I mean, I mean, I looked it up. Yeah, it's interesting. It's worth, in my opinion, it's something now I might watch a playthrough of. They're not kidding. If you like Monty Python, you'll very much like it. It's got that same dry humor, dry absurdist humor, I guess is the best way to describe it. Um, yeah, but it is a lot of voice. I mean, that's not even like the whole list. There's just a ton of voice actors. I just picked out a few. So there were other adventure games that are set in this time period for Arthurian legend. We did an episode on Sierra Online. The what was it? Roberta Williams, their company. They King's Quest. That's the episode. We covered Sierra Online and King's Quest, and we covered her. Sierra Online published a DOS game in January of 1990. It was called Conquest of Camelot: The Search for the Grail. It's a very typical Sierra adventure game for its time. It's got action sequences, it's got puzzles to solve, it's got riddles to solve. And basically, like, the game starts at the decline of Camelot. The decline happened because of the love triangle between Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. It cursed the land, brought famine and drought to Camelot. After having a vision of the Holy Grail brought to him, Gawain, Lancelot, and Galahad go on the quest for the Holy Grail, and they don't return. So Arthur goes off to find his missing knights and to find the Grail. And what's cool about this game is because it shows, like, historically a very unique period. It shows basically Britain kind of under Roman rule, but before Christianity replaces the old religions. So, like, in Camelot, there is a chapel dedicated to Mithras, for the soldiers of Roman heritage. Just, he's Roman, and then there is a chapel for Jesus Christ for the Christian soldiers. And you see this throughout the game, where you can see the old religion and the new religion in a period where they both existed. And I think that's really freaking cool. It portrays Aphrodite as a real god in the game, but her powers and influence are in decline because Christianity is becoming a thing. So it's a really neat depiction of a unique time period, fictional time period, but a unique time period where these two of them. So King Arthur just isn't found in cartoons. Obviously, we know from Monty Python, it's in movies. But there are more modern examples of that. So in 2004, there's literally a movie called King Arthur. It had Clive Owen starring as King Arthur and Keira Knightley as Guinevere. Do you remember this one at all?
I have not seen that. No,
Yeah. It
it doesn't sound very good by that reaction.
Nah, no. It barely follows any traditional legend. It takes the names and just uses a lot of artistic license with them. It was a Jerry Bruckheimer film. This was Jerry Bruckheimer's heyday. Big budget, big production. But it opened up against Spider-Man 2 and the first Anchorman movie.
Oh yeah, no, couldn't
Yeah,
couldn't compete.
yeah. And on top of that, it got slammed by critics. Its Rotten Tomatoes rating is only 31%.
Well, damn, yeah, that's sometimes those are really good movies, though. To be fair, you really
Yeah.
got to give them a try.
So it was made into a video game. It was developed by Chrome Studios. They're best known now for rebooting the Spyro series in the mid 2000s. Konami published the game. It's an action adventure game, and there's really nothing else to tell you about it because it rates just as well, if not worse, than the movie. But there are other games that try to do better with accuracy. In November 2009, Paradox Interactive, which we talked about recently, if you'll recall, they're like the king daddy of strategy games. Who bought, what did we talk about Paradox? There was a company that got bought by Paradox that we were talking about recently.
The Paradox sounds familiar, but I cannot remember what.
I know, and it's bugging me because I remember it was towards the end of an episode. It was like the history of a studio, and it was the history of a studio, and I was like, oh yeah, Paradox bought these guys out, and now they're helping make strategy games, and blah 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 blah. And I genuinely don't remember what it was. It wasn't StarCraft, Mr. BattleTech? Maybe it was the guys who made the BattleTech, or Lemmings. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Don't hold me to any of that. I don't have a great memory.
Nor
Um,
do Rob.
yeah. But Paradox is the king of strategy games. They, Hearts of Iron and so many others. Paradox is like the guy. They made a strategy game. They published a strategy game rather called King Arthur, the role playing war game. It's a mix of real time strategy, role playing, and grand strategy. It has a big campaign which follows King Arthur's conquest of Britain. Battles are fought in real time. Units, though, can earn experience to raise attributes. And then, of course, there are heroes with special abilities like the Knights of the Round. They did make a sequel for it in 2012. It's called King Arthur 2, the role playing war game. They're both found on Steam. They're like $10 a piece, or you can find a collection of both with all the DLC for like $25 or less. I think it was 22 and some change when I found it. Reviews are very mixed because of technical issues. The general consensus after I poured through reviews is if you can get it to work, it's a great game. Keeping if you can get it to work. Because all of the poor reviews are it crashes, it crashes, it crashes. I can't get past this part, can't get it to start. So the people who can actually play it enjoy it, but it's played with technical issues that may prevent you from doing so. And actually, I have the first one, but it is on my list of games I have never ever actually played whatsoever. So I can't tell you much about it. Um, I was bound to stumble across that list at one time. Huh? Eh? Eh?
Yeah, no, definitely there's no doubt about it.
I mean, we have a big list. I mean, you probably have a bunch of games that you probably have a bunch of games you've never played. Thanks to Humble, I probably got that in a Humble Bundle to be honest with you. So
Oh yeah, no, I definitely have quite the long list of games to someday play, but yeah, we'll get to them someday, maybe. Who knows?
there was a 1991 Capcom arcade cabinet called Knights of the Round. It is a action role playing beat 'em up. So it's like Final Fight, a side scrolling beat 'em up, but it has a level advancement system. And basically, Arthur, Lancelot, and Percival they set out across Britain to defeat the evil king and bring Britain together. So that's a depiction somewhere. Have you ever read the Japanese novel Fate Stay Night or heard of it?
I've not. I feel like there's an anime, the Fate series. I don't know if it's related.
Mm-hmm.
It's one that's on my list, and the probably is pretty high on my list of the ones that I need to get to when I finish what I'm currently watching. So,
Well,
I know of it, but I don't know it. Uh, I just know it by name.
I mean, so Japanese visual novel Fate Stay Night, also an adult erotic game for Windows.
Oh, that might not be the same thing.
It features a young female knight called Saber, whose true name is Artoria. She becomes king by pulling free the sword from the stone, but knowing that armies wouldn't follow a woman, she renames herself King Arthur and she uses Merlin's magic to hide her gender. So that's kind of interesting.
I don't think that's the same thing I'm thinking of.
I don't know, maybe not.
That's
Someone may
interesting.
well, I mean, maybe. I mean, I know there's more than one Fate Stay. There's prequels and stuff like that, so it might be. But when I looked up the genre, it was how do you say it? Arome, Erome, Arome. Do you know how they say that one?
No, honestly don't. No idea
Yeah,
what that is.
yeah. So I assume. I mean, I looked it up. It's an erotic game. I don't really know anything. There's a game called The Dark Age of Camelot, which is an MMORPG. They released it in October 2001. It's set in the period after King Arthur's death, and the kingdom has split into three realms that are constantly at war with one another. You have a little bit of Arthurian lore. It brings Norse mythology into the world and Irish Celtic legend. They all kind of come together in these three realms for the Dark Age of Camelot. Sonic and the Black Knight throws back to Arthurian legend. That's a 2009 Wii platforming game. Sonic the Hedgehog is saving the city Camelot from King Arthur after King Arthur becomes corrupt and calls himself the Black Knight. And after defeating the Black Knight, Merlin's granddaughter, Merlina, reveals Sonic to be basically King Arthur was a fake created by her grandfather. So if you beat the game, spoiler alert, Sonic is actually King Arthur himself.
But he's also a hedgehog.
Yes. But of course, those are games that are based on Arthurian legend. There are other depictions of King Arthur in video games. Rob and I spent some time talking about RuneScape. They actually have Camelot in RuneScape. As we said, all the Knights of the Round. You actually go on a quest for the Holy Grail where you meet the Fisher King. It's pretty accurate, actually, if you think about it.
No, they definitely did their homework on that one.
Yeah. They do a really good job. The depictions of Arthurian legend in RuneScape are great. Stronghold Legends is another game. It includes a campaign that is King Arthur's legend, fight across Britain for Britain. Two of the newer Tomb Raiders are based on Arthurian legend. Tomb Raider Legend, the plot literally revolves around all the mystery of King Arthur's legend. And then Underworld is her trying to find Avalon, where she believes Lara Croft believes her mother is. So you got two modern Tomb Raider games that use King Arthur's legend as the basis of their stories. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Final Fantasy VII. The most powerful summon in the game is Knights of the Round, obviously inspired by the actual Knights of the Round Table. Also, probably why a lot of people think there's only 12 Knights of the Round Table, to be fair. Soul Calibur has Arthur in it, right? He's a samurai, but he's there. I kind of like the notion of King Arthur as a samurai with a samurai sword. I think it's cool. Fire
Hmm.
Emblem. What? I'm
I
not
just don't
wrong.
remember that. No, I just don't remember that. I was trying to think of it and I don't remember that.
I thought we talked about him when we did the Soul Calibur episode.
We might have, and I just don't remember.
Soul Calibur characters. List of Soul Calibur characters.
Well, it looks like Arthur was in certain countries that discouraged samurai imagery, and was a replacement for Mitsurugi.
There you go. Instead, not replace. Instead, I had looked it up as a blend or recalled it as a blend, but it was not. So
Gotcha.
that's Mitsurugi. Mitsurugi. Why can't I find fucking Mitsurugi? Yep, Arthur. Arthur is a playable character introduced in the first Soul Calibur, where he replaced Mitsurugi in Korea due to local sensibilities regarding the subject of the samurai. He's an orphaned European who has become a swordsman in Japan. Okay, so I'm not completely wrong. My recollection of it was like from reading about it was weird. In his first appearance, he looks exactly like Mitsurugi, except he has blonde hair and an eye patch. His weapons, move list, and his ending are all identical to Mitsurugi's. He returned as a bonus character in Soul Calibur 3. Um, yes, so there you go. I wasn't completely wrong. He is in Soul Calibur. I did read that right. And he is a samurai. He is an orphan European who's become a swordsman in Japan. He's basically Arthur. He's a reskinned Mitsurugi. So ta-da,
Woo. Yeah, I don't
ta-da.
remember. I didn't recall that, but yeah,
Uh,
nice.
Fire Emblem. Well, we wouldn't have. We're not in Korea, and I mean, I don't think he's been in any others. To be fair, I don't see him. I don't see him in any others. I don't know if it doesn't say. It doesn't say that they brought him into later ones after 3. So there's a good chance we've never seen him before. Fire Emblem has a bunch of characters from Arthurian legend. Rob, you like the Ace Combat series, do you not?
I do.
The Ace Combat Zero, the Balkan War. The story is very heavily based on Arthurian legend. There are allusions to Excalibur, there are allusions to Avalon. It may be a jet fighting game, but it basically plays out as Arthur's legend, which is kind of cool. So, um, so there are a lot of depictions of Arthurian legend. Not a lot of Grail. I think RuneScape is the only time the Legend of the Grail pops back up. Huh?
Uh, yeah.
Most of the games are set in like when Arthur was uniting Britain, when he wanted to wipe the floor with the Saxons. There's a lot of games that look at that time period. But there's not really any games. Oh, Conquest of Camelot, The Search for the Grail. Duh. That was really the only one in there that talked about the Grail. The rest of them really were more either the Knights of the Round Table or Arthur. Like when they do depict Arthur, they do it from the historical aspect of like, him kicking ass across Europe. So there you go. Not a whole lot of Holy Grail, but a whole lot of Arthur being a badass king, knocking down those castles. But yeah, that's Arthurian legend, Rob. Not a whole lot of I don't know, not a whole lot.
No, I'd say that's quite a lot, Dave. That's
Yeah,
definitely a lot more in depth than any Arthurian legend that I can recall. So, yeah, definitely a lot.
well, whole lot of other episodes scattered in here. We talked about Westwood, we talked about EA Seattle, we talked about Sierra Online. These are all topics that we've covered before. And if you would like to check out those old episodes, you can do so by going to our website at www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people do by going to memorycardlane.com?
Well, Dave, a calendar of past and future episodes can be found on our website. You can go ahead and leave us some little notes about some games you played. Maybe we can bring something up and bring back fond memories from people. You can read blurbs about Dave and me. You can find links to things such as our social media, where I can be found on several platforms as Rob underscore O underscore Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Hey, you know what I did the other day?
What'd you do, Dave?
I revived my Twitch account, not for streaming. I mean, I streamed. I wanted, and now that I found out that I could do this, we're gonna have to organize this. I wanted to see if we could do a Jackbox party night, and I got Jackbox streaming. I put my Twitch stream on, and then I opened it up so I could sit in the living room with people and do it. So I got it onto my living room TV. I actually streamed it through my Xbox and made sure that everything worked. And then I felt bad because I wasn't really interested to play. Other people started to join me, probably because they look through the Jackbox category for streams to play with people, and I had to be like, "Sorry guys, I'm not actually playing. I'm testing this out," and quit.
So you had people join you and just dipped, huh?
I mean, I it was Eric's birthday. Eric's been with us before, and we had plans to play. Oh, I did play another video game. Eric and I played A Way Out. I completely forgot. That's how I spent like 3 or 4 hours on Sunday, or Saturday. Yeah, it would have been Saturday. We started playing A Way Out, which is that co-op like Prison Break game from a little ways back. It's been on our list forever. Every year for his birthday, we traditionally play a game together, and that's what we decided to start this year. So I played another video game I forgot about.
Hmm.
So,
Look at you go, Dave.
but anyways, got my Twitch stream up, and I set up Jackbox. So we're gonna have to organize like a Jackbox night where we could all play, probably with our significant others for those of us that have them.
Yeah, way to rub it in, Dave.
Sorry. Well, I mean, that was the point of doing that, so Eric could include his now wife because he just got married. Fun stuff. Congratulations, married couple. If he listens to this, I know he listens. So, anyways, David is wrong. There's that Twitch stream. Maybe you can catch me online and join us to play some Jackbox stuff because Jackbox is pretty fun. So, yeah. Each week, we will tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game. It can be about a multiple games as it was this week. It can be about a console, technology, person. We kind of talked about a person today, did we not?
Kinda, yeah. Yeah, a
Maybe
little bit.
not a real person, but a person nonetheless.
I mean, to be
We
fair, how many times do we talk about real people on this show, Dave?
Very true. We did actually talk about a real person because I talked about two writers that actually existed. So there were two actual writers.
Well, yeah, we talk
Uh,
about real people every week, the people who make these games.
Crap, you got me there. We talk about various topics. We tell their story. While doing so, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world as its legacy. One of the best parts about getting to do this week in and week out is as we pick a topic and we research about it, we learn things. I probably haven't had this in depth of a lesson on Arthurian legend in a long time. It was a nice refresher. Oops. It was a nice refresher. And also, there were some video games in here that I had never ever heard of. So I learned a bunch today. I'm sure Rob learned a bunch today. It's the best part about doing this podcast. As part of their commitment to learning and teaching and our recognition of the cycle that is learning and teaching, each week we like to go and talk about our takeaways. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
King Arthur wasn't real.
Yeah, that's always a bummer, isn't it?
It's the biggest bummer.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. There was a lot of pretty much every single game that occurred is one that I was unfamiliar with. I think that the thought of Blazing Dragons is amazing with all of those characters or voice actors. Um, that alone is just incredible. But To be fair, I think the thing I learned most, I didn't know, and I don't know that this is necessarily 100%, but that King Arthur started from the history of the kings. It's not something that I had ever
Thought
read or
about.
heard about. It's obviously I mostly knew him from movies and games and things, so I didn't know where that came from, and to know that there's actually 12 books that tell the story. Well,
I
not
mean,
necessarily 12 just of Arthur, but
well,
um,
it's yeah. I mean, it's like an encyclopedia. It's one book, 12 stories. They're called books, but yeah, I get what you're saying. So
yeah, I guess I just didn't know that, so I think that's probably it for me. That was as far as we know the route where Arthur was from, and it's kind of cool. So yeah,
yeah, there's a couple of like like actual historical books that basically like he appears in. But the problem is, and why he's largely seen mostly as a fictional thing, is like these books both date 300 years after he is supposedly supposed to have lived. So they just don't jive with the timelines don't jive, and so even though they're actual medieval historical sources, we treat them as that. Like eh, that's why we cite it as inspiration, because like both of them see him as like a Romano British leader who fought against invading Saxons in like the 5th or 6th century. And he shows up again in like a 9th century Latin book where, it actually lists 12 battles that he fought, including the Battle of Badon, where he's said to have single handedly killed 960 men. I mean, that's kind of, like badass, but what's the likeliness that that's true? You know what I mean?
I don't
Um,
know, Dave. There were some pretty badasses in the old days.
so yeah, so you have all of these books, these actual historical books that kind of allude to Arthur, but realistically, like their timelines don't jive, their stories are outlandish. So he is just largely seen as a fictional figure that is just more of an inspiration, more of an inspiration from some of the actual whatchamacallits. Because, I mean, legitimately, Arthurian legend is English folklore. It's got a little bit of Welsh mythology in it. It's basically literary invention. Like, it's not, I don't know. It's just not. So, in general, no. They say Arthur is not, Arthur is a work of fiction. And honestly, that's more believable.
So that's your takeaway, Dave?
What is my takeaway? I honestly had forgot about some of the like his history, like Uther Pendragon dying after being poisoned by Saxons. It was fun to get to like go back and read, and I summarized it. I read the crib notes and then summarized the crib notes too. So it's fun to kind of go back and look at that, the history of Britain book, and read some of these actual stories. Because realistically, nowadays, all I think about King Arthur is the Knights of the Round Table and the quest for the Holy Grail. Like that's really all I think about. But in all reality, Arthur, his father Uther Pendragon, like there's a whole story there for it, and it was fun to dive back into all of that. So that's my takeaway. So
It
yeah,
is quite the story if you don't know it. Because yeah, like I said, that was more knowledge of the Arthurian legend than I had ever known. I knew of the Round Table and the Holy Grail, but his father and all that fun stuff, yeah, that's new to me too. So that's kind of on in line with mine, that those books that tell the history of England
yep.
or Britain, whatever you want to.
And that'll do it. That's King Arthur. We did it.
We did
Yay.
that.
Well,
We did, Dave.
Rob, it's about that time. So before I take it out of here, what would you like to add to today's episode?
Well, Dave, as always, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you to everyone for listening. It means the world to us, and we really hope that you enjoy what you hear. And if not, well, sorry we can't please everyone.
That's right. Well, Rob, next week we're going to learn all about Breakout. You ever heard of Breakout?
It's the breakdancing game, right?
Sure, we'll go with that. It's an arcade video game that was released by Atari in May of 1976. As part of its story, we're going to learn all about its conception on its way to becoming one of the top grossing arcade cabinets for 2 consecutive years during the golden age of arcades. So stick around and join us as we break through the brick ceiling on yet another trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Dooby doom doom dun dum bop doo doom bow.